She had a legitimate concern for the welfare of this neighbor.
Police make their way into the residence to do a welfare check on the homeowner, 50-year-old Shanita Glanville. But after they enter the home, the officers are shocked by what they find.
They find the man on the floor, dead.
He was shot once in the head, once in the torso, and once in the arm.
A woman who they believe to be Shanita is lying just a few feet away from the male victim.
They find her lying face down, 2 shots through the rear of her head.
She was killed execution style.
Who would want to gun down these 2 victims? And why?
People, they were shocked. They were confused. This kind of thing doesn't happen in that town.
As police try to make sense of this double homicide, they'll uncover a tangled web of deceit, where one woman's desire to please her man put those she loved in danger.
She was willing to do whatever it took to make sure her man was happy.
Chanel Cunningham was known for her warm personality and impeccable taste in fashion.
Chanel was beautiful. She was vibrant. Her smile lit up a room.
The fashionista was determined to own her own store one day.
Chanel was willing to work hard to have a store of her own. That was her dream.
At a party one night in February of 1998, Chanel crossed paths with someone who seemed like he could make all her dreams come true. Swanky businessman Maurice Phillips.
Maurice was a handsome, just brown-skinned young man, and she is absolutely awestruck by him.
He had swagger like nobody else. She was amazed by him.
Instantly, there's this connection.
Maurice and Chanel talked for hours.
He was smart. He had his own business. Maurice was everything that she had been looking for.
But she saw in him for someone who was just as driven as she was, just as ambitious. They were a perfect match.
From that night on, Chanel and Maurice were inseparable.
Once Maurice Phillips and Chanel started dating, things got intense.
Chanel felt like she hit the jackpot. She finally found a man that she could depend on, a man that could take care of things.
Chanel had found everything that she was looking for in Maurice. She was absolutely enamored by him.
If Chanel wanted a Prince Charming, Maurice stepped into that role immediately.
Maurice showered Chanel with exotic trips and a life of luxury.
Maurice, he gave the appearance of perfection. He took her to romantic places around the world and gave her what she thought she would never see.
Maurice and Chanel, they were doing it all. They went to Super Bowls, Celebrity All-Star Weekend basketball games.
Chanel not only fell in love with Maurice, she also fell in love with that lifestyle. And we're talking about a lifestyle of fancy cars, big houses.
In the summer of 2001, Maurice also made Chanel's dream of starting her own boutique come true.
He worked with her to start her own business, and just as he had done for himself, she was really inspired by him.
Because of Maurice, Chanel is really walking in the life that she's envisioned for herself.
But little did Chanel know that behind all of the bling, there was more to Maurice and his small business than met the eye.
Maurice was really looking for someone he could trust, and he saw that in Chanel.
Whatever he was doing, she became his ride or die.
June 26, 2002. Detectives have just arrived at the scene of a brutal double homicide at a residence in Winmore, Pennsylvania. The homeowner, Shanita Glanville, and a male victim have been found shot to death.
She had been killed execution style, 2 shots in the back of her head.
The man was shot once in the head, once in the arm, and in the torso as well.
Officers informed detectives that the male victim is Shanita's godson, Dane King, and that they suspect the murders occurred around 24 hours prior.
The police learned from neighbors that Dane King had just came down from Philadelphia to help Shanita with some computer issues.
Detectives believe the assailant wasn't after Dane, but his godmother.
The shooter probably didn't expect somebody else to be there.
It's a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
But that's not the only reason detectives suspect Shanita Glanville was the killer's main target.
They knew Shanita was an informant.
Shanita had been working with detectives in their investigation of a local drug ring. And it seems the drug ring may have found out.
Shanita was ratting them out. They could have wanted to silence Shanita for good.
The hunt for Shanita and Dane's killer is on, and police think they know just who they're looking for. But what they don't yet know is that there's another suspect at the center of this brutal slaying. One whose loyalty veered towards love over friendship.
She would do anything for him. She got herself and her friend so engrossed in this that there was really no way out.
You've reached the point that she always dreamed she could be at.
But soon, a friend would threaten the lifestyle that Chanel had grown to love. And shots would ring out.
Chanel was ready to do whatever it took to keep Maurice safe, to keep her family safe, and keep them together.
June 26, 2002. Windmore detectives are investigating the brutal double homicide of Shanita Glanville and Dane King.
They find her with 2 shots through the rear of her head.
Next to Shanita is her godson, Dane King. He's found with multiple gunshots to the body.
Detectives believe Shanita's godson was an innocent bystander, and that Shanita was the targeted hit.
Shanita was working with the feds, working up a case against this immense drug operation.
It was a major cocaine empire that was spreading throughout the Northeast.
Shanita was ratting them out. They could have wanted to silence Shanita for good.
Shanita had started working with law enforcement just 1 month earlier, after her home was raided by federal agents for suspicion of money laundering.
They're looking for W-2 forms, tax forms. They've confiscated everything.
In order to avoid jail time, Shanita jumped at the chance to make a deal with law enforcement.
Shanita was very interested in working with the FBI agent. You know, to better her situation, she pretty much started at the beginning and told them everything.
Shanita told them she had been working for Maurice Phillips, who was already on investigators' radar for drugs.
Maurice was a dangerous man.
He's involved in some really bad stuff and with some really bad people.
Detectives know that if Maurice found out Shanita was a rat, he would have wanted revenge. But before police can officially pin the double homicide on Maurice, they'll need cold, hard proof.
They're looking for paperwork, they're looking for documents, they're looking for the money trail.
However, it soon becomes evident that Maurice couldn't have been the one who pulled the trigger.
At the time of the crime, Maurice was at a luxury restaurant, which could be verified by surveillance cameras.
He had a rock-solid alibi.
Detectives know that just because Maurice didn't pull the trigger doesn't mean he's innocent. They wade through Maurice's financial records and see that he withdrew a large sum of cash on the same day as the murders.
Maurice could have set it up. It's a classic kind of gangland style hit. Murder for hire.
And within Maurice's phone records, detectives find a clue that just might lead them to a potential hitman. They see that on the day of the crime, Maurice made a flurry of phone calls to a single number.
He calls his cousin in Tennessee numerous times.
Detectives identify Maurice's cousin as 31-year-old Bryant Patterson. And from looking at Bryant's credit card transactions, it appears he made a quick round trip to Philadelphia in the days before and after the murders.
The cousin, not living in the Philadelphia area, was the best person to come in, get the job done, and go back home. Less likely to be a suspect because he's not from the area.
When detectives reach out to their counterparts in Tennessee for assistance with locating Bryant, they're met with a surprise.
Bryant was arrested in Tennessee on a gun charge, unrelated to this criminal activity in the Philadelphia area.
Detectives travel down to Tennessee to speak with Bryant. In an interrogation room, they're pleased to find that their suspect is willing to talk.
Bryant wanted to make a deal with the police.
Bryant admits that he's the one who gunned down Shanita and Dane.
He said, "I'm your shooter. I'm the one that did the killing."
Bryant was spilling the beans.
But Bryant isn't going down alone.
Chanel loved Maurice. Love makes you do crazy things sometimes.
She lost her best friend because she was at the point where she would do anything for a man.
Working with the feds, and we're working up a case against Maurice, and this is the reason why he wanted Shanita eliminated.
But before detectives can take down Maurice Phillips, they need cold, hard proof of their theory. Luckily, they're now sitting down in a Tennessee interrogation room with someone who can help. Maurice's cousin, Bryant Patterson.
Bryant actually confessed to being the murderer. He pulled the trigger.
Bryant confirms he carried out the crime at his cousin's behest.
Bryant Patterson tells investigators that he didn't know Shanita personally. His cousin, Maurice, commissioned him to do a hit, and Maurice offered him $18,000 for the murder.
Bryant tells detectives it all started a few weeks before, on June 24th.
He got a phone call from his cousin. His cousin told him to come to Philly so they could take care of a problem.
Bryant says he made the drive up to Philly right away. And once he got there, Maurice filled him in.
Maurice informed Bryant that Shanita needed to be taken care of.
Maurice told Bryant that Shanita was a rat and she needed to be silenced before she took the entire organization down.
He said, "You need to help eliminate this problem."
Maurice gives him a .45 caliber gun.
Maurice gave Bryant the address and told him, "Go take care of the snitch."
Bryant tells police that Maurice had carefully covered every detail.
Maurice wanted to be as far away from this crime as possible.
He's gonna be at a restaurant where a lot of people can see him.
Bryant then gives authorities a play-by-play of what happened on the night of June 25th.
He parked at a local business down the street from Shanita's home.
Bryant opened the door and crept inside, with Shanita none the wiser.
As soon as he sees her, he pulls out the .45, tells her to get on the ground, and shoots her in the back of the head twice. Execution style.
Bryant says he didn't know Shanita's godson was visiting, but he couldn't leave any witnesses.
Dane King immediately is scared. He starts trying to fight Bryant.
He was fighting for his life. Bryant turned the gun on Dane, and he emptied the chamber.
Once both victims were dead, Bryant called Maurice.
He called Maurice Phillips on the phone and told him, "It's done. I did it."
Bryant tells detectives that Maurice then gave him instructions to collect his earnings.
Maurice informed Bryant that you go and meet this person at this location and they're going to pay you $16,000.
But Bryant says the location of the second portion of his earnings took him by surprise.
Maurice tells Bryant he can go to the boutique that he and Chanel own and he can get the rest of the money.
At this admission, detectives' ears perk up. Maurice's girlfriend has been on their radar ever since their talks with Shanita.
Shanita and Chanel were the best of friends, so much so that they were family.
According to Shanita, Chanel was in charge of recruitment for her man's drug empire, and Chanel was the one who had convinced Shanita to get involved in the first place.
Chanel explained that it was her role in Maurice's business to keep an eye out for people that were intelligent, people that could crunch numbers, that could move money around. And being that Shanita was a mortgage broker, she fit the bill to a T.
Now detectives wonder if Chanel also had a hand in planning her friend's demise.
Did Chanel have anything to do with it?
She didn't want to lose him. She didn't want her man to go to jail.
In the summer of 2002, police have charged 31-year-old Bryant Patterson for pulling the trigger in the brutal shooting of Shanita Glanville and her godson, Dane King. But Bryant claims it was all at the behest of his cousin, drug kingpin Maurice Phillips.
Bryant told the police, "I did it for Maurice Phillips. That's who hired me to do it. And he paid me $18,000 to do this killing."
Maurice found out that Shanita, in essence, was a snitch. So he called Bryant and hired him to silence Shanita for good.
With more than enough evidence to take down Maurice, detectives only have one question remaining. Was Maurice's girlfriend, Chanel Cunningham, involved in the murder-for-hire plot? After all, Bryant did go to Chanel and Maurice's boutique after the murders to collect part of his earnings.
Maurice had given him the privy to go to Chanel's store and get $2,000 worth of goods for himself to make up for the other $2,000 of the $18,000 he was promised for the murder.
Unfortunately for police, Bryant doesn't seem to know much more about Chanel's involvement.
When he came into the store, he got what he wanted. He did, and he left.
After detectives arrive back in Philadelphia, police head to Chanel and Maurice's home with a search warrant in hand. The officers approach with caution.
They knew Maurice was dangerous. In order to get the power that he had, you had to be willing to do some dangerous things.
Maurice answers the door. And fortunately, he complies without incident. Chanel comes out just in time to see her man being cuffed, only to have the officers apprehend her next.
She knew when she was arrested that the only thing that she could do was cooperate with police, that her life of luxury and fantasy was over.
Back at the station, detectives speak to Maurice first.
They tell Maurice that they know that he had ordered the hit on Shanita. They have Bryant's confession and his role in murder for hire.
But Maurice isn't going down easy.
Maurice denies it. He says they're trying to throw him under the bus.
Maurice says that Brian did this all on his own. He wasn't involved.
With Maurice refusing to cooperate, detectives book him on a myriad of charges.
Maurice is charged with murder for hire. He's charged with criminal conspiracy, money laundering, and distributing cocaine.
Next up is Chanel. Detectives are still unsure if she was involved in the double homicide and are hoping they can finally get the truth.
They were able to connect Chanel with the drug business, but they were never really able to connect her to the murder.
Detectives notice that when they bring up Shanita's death, Chanel becomes visibly upset.
Chanel, she always considered Shanita to be like an aunt to her. They were very close.
At that point, it turned realistic. This was no longer the fairy tale.
Chanel tells detectives she's ready to talk.
As much as she loved Maurice, she was ready to tell whatever they needed to know.
She says at first, she fell in love with Maurice's swagger, and at the time, didn't realize what he was involved in. But after a while, Maurice told Chanel the truth.
Small businesses were the front for a drug business.
Chanel admits that although she was surprised at first, she wasn't fazed.
By this time, Chanel didn't even care how he made his money. She was down for him, and she was down to help.
She loves Maurice and she loves the lifestyle. So she's not going to give up on the love and she's not going to give up on the lifestyle.
Chanel tells detectives she slowly got integrated into Maurice's drug business.
Chanel became completely engrossed in the business, and it wasn't just Maurice anymore. It was both of them involved in this criminal activity.
Chanel says that's when she offered a solution that she'll regret for the rest of her life.
Chanel loved Maurice so much that she was willing to not only risk her life, her freedom.
Summer 2002. Detectives have arrested Maurice Phillips and Chanel Cunningham for their role in a multi-million-dollar cocaine ring.
They are right on their heels of bringing down this drug conspiracy.
They believe Maurice paid his cousin, Bryant Patterson, to kill police informant Shanita Glanville.
Maurice tells Brian that he needed to get rid of Shanita before she could testify against him.
Unfortunately, Shanita wasn't the only one who suffered Maurice's wrath.
Bryant then turned the gun on the godson, Dane King.
With Bryant in custody and his confession in tow, detectives have what they need on Maurice. But they're still not sure if Chanel was involved in the hit on Shanita.
They can connect Chanel to the drug business, but they can't connect her to Shanita's death.
Fortunately, Chanel has decided to come clean and tell all.
She knows all she can do is cooperate and pray that they have leniency.
Chanel admits that she eventually became immersed in Maurice's drug business. And by the fall of 2000, their empire began soaring to new heights.
Their drug business was expanding, and they were making money exponentially. So much so that they kind of didn't know what to do with all the money that they were making.
They couldn't very well just walk into a bank and make millions of dollars in a deposit and expect no one to notice.
If you're living in a certain size house and you're driving a certain size car and you're paying certain size taxes, people start looking at your bank accounts.
That's when Chanel got an idea for a new recruit, her longtime family friend, Shanita Glanville.
Shanita Glanville was a successful mortgage broker. She was known for doing well in her business. She was known for crunching numbers.
Chanel and Shanita's relationship was really close. They loved each other. Shanita was pretty much an aunt toward Chanel.
Chanel knew that Shanita was exactly what Maurice would need to hide all of this illegal money they were making.
Chanel tells detectives when she made the proposal to Shanita, her friend was taken aback at first.
When Shanita heard these words, she couldn't believe that Chanel was wrapped up into something this major.
But when Chanel told Shanita how much money she would make, Shanita caved.
She agreed. As much as she was reluctant at first, she was looking at the green.
Chanel tells detectives, from that point on, she and Shanita worked together to strengthen the ring's cover.
They wouldn't create false documents, W-2s, anything to make the drug operation look as legitimate as possible.
They were buying properties and selling properties with false institutions that they owned.
Chanel says things were going well once Shanita got involved. That is, until Maurice caught wind of the raid at Shanita's house.
Maurice has been in this game a long time before he met Chanel. And so the people that he works with know people who know people.
When Maurice suspected that Shanita was the informant, he was furious.
Maurice told Chanel that if Shanita flipped on them, it would be Chanel's fault, since she's the one who brought Shanita into the business.
Maurice now wants Chanel to go and confront Shanita and ask her, are you cooperating? Are you telling on us? Are you squealing on us?
Chanel loved Maurice, and Chanel was willing to do anything for her man. She did as Maurice requested her to do. She went over, she talked to Shanita.
She demanded to know if Shanita had said anything about Chanel and Maurice's operation.
Shanita, she was absolutely frantic that Maurice knew about the raid.
She's scared out of her mind because she knows what Maurice is capable of.
Chanel says Shanita was hysterical, adamantly denying the allegations. And Chanel believed her.
She called Maurice on the phone and said, I just confronted her. She's not involved in ratting on us. She's still with us.
She tried to talk Maurice down, and she thought that she did.
He told her, okay, I'm not gonna do anything to her.
Chanel said after that, she thought everything was squashed. She believed Shanita, and she thought that Maurice did too.
But a few days later, Chanel and Maurice got word from an associate that Shanita hadn't been honest with them.
He flew off the handle.
She knew the love that he had for her. But when it came down to the business, there is no love.
In the summer of 2002, police are speaking with 29-year-old Chanel Cunningham about her role in an extensive drug ring led by her kingpin boyfriend, Maurice Phillips. Detectives believe Maurice is also behind a murder-for-hire scheme that left 2 people dead, including Chanel's best friend, Shanita Glanville.
You've got Bryant, the guy that carried out the murder for hire, who's willing to testify. Then Maurice orchestrated it.
There's just one question remaining. Was Chanel involved in her friend's murder?
They know that Chanel is involved in the drug dealing, but they don't know if she's at all implicated in the murder of her friend Shanita.
Chanel tells detectives that a few weeks before the murder, Maurice ordered her to confront Shanita after he got wind of the raid at her house.
Chanel had come to her and confronted her.
When her friend denied working with police, she believed her.
Chanel called Maurice and told Maurice that she didn't betray them at all.
But the situation was far from over. A few days later, Maurice told Chanel that he found out Shanita had lied to her.
That must have been chilling when he told her that.
Chanel was shocked. She was afraid of Maurice.
Chanel knew Maurice was furious, but she loved him. She didn't want to think that he was capable of doing this to her friend.
Chanel says she thought about warning Shanita that Maurice had found out the truth, but didn't want to cross her man.
She's kind of torn between her friendship and her love for her man.
Chanel says on June 25th, Maurice told her that his cousin was going to retrieve some merchandise from their store.
When Bryant went to pick up his $2,000 in luxury items at the boutique, Chanel had no knowledge of why Maurice was being so generous. She no way thought that Bryant arrived in Philly from Tennessee to kill her best friend.
But later, Maurice unleashed his dirty secret.
Maurice told her what had happened. Shanita was dead.
Said, babe, I had to do this for us. You know, it was either her or us.
Chanel was devastated, but she tried not to show it.
Chanel says that after Maurice confessed, although she was shocked, they never spoke about it again. And she admitted that she still loved him.
This was a man she had been with for years. She didn't want to lose him.
Chanel says she regrets not coming forward to police. But most of all, she regrets that she didn't warn her friend.
Chanel tells police that she felt remorse for Shanita's death. She feels ashamed that she didn't say anything sooner.
Even though Chanel had nothing to do with her friend's murder, she's still charged with a plethora of crimes regarding her involvement in the drug organization.
She's charged with conspiracy to distribute cocaine, transactional money laundering, and aiding and abetting.
In January of 2010, Maurice's trial gets underway in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Chanel Cunningham is the prosecution's star witness.
Chanel decided to testify against Maurice because this is not how she wanted it to end. Yes, she loved Maurice, but she also loved Shanita, and Shanita was dead.
Bryant Patterson also testifies against Maurice. And the kingpin is ultimately found guilty.
He receives 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole.
For their cooperation, Chanel and Bryant are given leniency by the court.
Chanel Cunningham receives 12 years after pleading guilty for money laundering and drug conspiracy.
As for triggerman Bryant Patterson, he walks away with the least time of the 3.
After pleading guilty for murder for hire, Bryant Patterson receives 9 years and 4 months.
People were shocked and angry after hearing Bryant Patterson's sentencing.
The family was outraged at the fact that he got this little bit of time for double murder.
Life is just absolutely invaluable. So when you're at that crossroads between love and life, choose life.
in love can make you feel like you have everything you'll ever need. It can make you look away, even when the one you love hurts the people who are most important to you. But love doesn't always last forever. And when it's gone, and you've turned your back on your true friends, who will you turn to then? In Dallas, Texas, Tasha Dunnigan is willing to do whatever it takes to provide for her man.
She came under the influence of this man, and he pushed her to become a prostitute.
But when Tasha's fired, her boyfriend talks her into a risky plan of revenge.
When she pulled her gun out and he immediately pulled his, that's when she started shooting.
She had no idea that this was going to ruin her life.
She wanted him to love her, so she'd do whatever he wanted, no matter what he asked.
And later, in Los Angeles, nurse Connie Ickpo is known for her generous ways.
Everybody she came in contact with seemed to think that her was being the perfect person.
But Connie and her pastor husband aren't as angelic as they seem.
This scheme was driven by unadulterated greed.
So the minute she let Christopher in her life, she starts down this dark and narrow path.
There are hundreds of thousands of women in prison at any given time in the U.S. These are the true stories of women who committed heinous crimes in the name of love. For my man. In Dallas, Texas, Tasha Dunnigan has lived a hard life.
Tasha grew up poor, without a lot of family support. Tasha did not graduate from high school.
With a lack of education, it's not easy for Tasha to find steady work. For the next decade, she moves aimlessly from one low-paying position to another.
She wasn't the type of person that could go out and get a job working as a secretary. So in terms of options on making a living, she was really, really limited.
It limits you because in this market, everybody, for the most part, employers are looking for qualified applicants that have a college degree or higher.
By the age of 34, Tasha meets a handsome, smooth talker named Henry Sanchez, who sweeps her off her feet.
Henry did not have a legal job. He was a low-level drug dealer, and at the time, he was primarily living off of Tasha.
And to pay the bills, Tasha takes a job at a local 24-hour massage parlor.
On the outside, it was a massage parlor. On the inside, it was a brothel.
It was a great opportunity. I think that you should at least take a shot at it.
Henry convinced her that she could make more money than either of them could in any other job if she just started turning tricks.
Tasha was a victim of Henry's control. This was a person who ruled with an iron fist. He was completely in charge. Whatever he wanted, she did. She just couldn't stand up to him.
She really, really just wanted to make some money and make ends meet so that she can pay her bills and do what she needed to do.
Despite the illicit nature of the job, it's the answer to all their money problems.
What is that?
She was making a lot of money every day.
Over 1,000, maybe over 2,000.
And so she would bring that home and give that to Henry.
I'm so proud of you. Imagine how much money you're going to make in the next few weeks.
When you live with someone who pressured you to become a prostitute, it beats you down. She loved him. And no matter how badly he treated her, she wanted him to love her. So she would try harder to do whatever he wanted, no matter what he asked.
That's my girl.
But after only a few months, Henry's gravy train comes to an abrupt halt when Tasha is suspected of pocketing some of the cash she was supposed to hand over to the business for herself.
You do know I need to see all your money.
That is all my money.
No.
The massage parlor's owner had a business of trust.
That is mine.
I clearly know it isn't.
He didn't want to give Tasha any chances. If he couldn't trust his employees, they were gone out the door right then and there.
So she was fired 2 months after she started working there.
It's a blow to Tasha, but she's more frightened by how Henry will react.
She was really devastated and heartbroken because she was losing the ability to make as much money as she had been making, and she dreaded telling Henry about this.
How are you?
He saw her as a meal ticket. She was someone to send out into the world and say, go make some money and bring it home so I can have shelter and I can have food and I can be with you when I want to.
What's going on?
As suspected, Henry doesn't take the news well.
They fired me.
You gotta be kidding me. What did you do?
Henry was in a fit of rage when he found out that she was fired. After all, you know, she used to make a lot of cash that she wasn't making anymore.
What am I going to do?
I don't know. I need some time to think.
With their primary source of income gone, Tasha and Henry are back to struggling to pay their bills. A few weeks after the dismissal, they're in dire straits.
This is an eviction notice.
Financial situation had gotten to a point where they were about to be evicted from their apartment.
Pay the rent?
Tasha didn't have any place to go. Henry didn't have any place to go. They were very desperate for money.
You lost your job last week, and I told you we gotta do something about it. Did you go back?
His anger built and built, and he decided he wanted to get even with the people who took away their means of support.
No, it was my money.
Well, maybe we should.
No, we're going to do that.
Facing eviction, Henry comes up with a plan that will solve all of their problems in one fell swoop.
Henry has an idea that will get revenge on Tasha's boss and also get them the cash they so desperately needed.
He's going to hold up the massage parlor. Because of the nature of the business, a robbery would go unreported.
Because it was such a cover for a prostitution house, they certainly thought that if something like this were to happen, they wouldn't call the police.
You work there, you know.
That, coupled with Tasha's first-hand knowledge of the operation, will make it an easy score.
Tasha knew the best time to go there. She also knew the layout of the building. She knew that they had no safe. And the way the money worked is the managers would keep the money in their pocket.
I mean, we would have to
But Tasha will need some convincing.
Tasha said she didn't want to hurt anyone. He kept pushing her and pushing her and pushing her until she said yes.
Tasha felt like she had to do what Henry wanted her to do. She wanted to please him, keep him happy.
2 or 3 guys I've seen.
Tasha tells him the place is like a fortress. You need an appointment and need to be buzzed in.
The way that it works is that they knock on the door, an armed manager comes and escorts them inside. There, they find a girl that they would like to have the massage services with. And then once the service is completed, then payment is taken.
The plan was for Tasha to show up. She knew that the door was going to be locked and tell them that she had lost her cell phone charger. And then once inside, she was supposed to go to the back of the building and open a back door for Henry.
What about the gun?
Once Henry is inside, he will demand that the night manager hand over all the night's cash earnings. He doesn't want to take any chances with the armed proprietor, so he asks his cousin to go along for the ride.
So what's going on?
He got his cousin involved so he could have one more gun with him. One more gun means more control over what's going to happen once they're inside.
They would have the manpower to scare or perhaps overpower the one manager and make him give up the cash.
That's the best way to go. We're gonna get this, Tasha.
It seems like the perfect plan, but Tasha's not so convinced.
She felt compelled. She had no other choice. She was facing eviction. They had no money. Tasha hopes that if she does exactly what Henry wants, nobody's going to get hurt.
A few days later, the trio puts their plan into action.
Tasha.
At sunrise, Henry hands Tasha a .38 caliber gun to put in her purse, and they drive over to the massage parlor a few miles from their home.
Robbing the place early in the morning also would have meant that the manager on duty would have had all the cash from their busiest time on hand. And since all their cash just went into the manager's pocket, at the end of that shift, it all would have just been sitting there, ripe for the picking.
Once on scene, everyone moves into position. Tasha rings the bell at the front door.
The manager looks out the window and sees Tasha at the door and lets her inside.
Tasha doesn't miss a beat, even when she spots another girl at the desk.
The only other person who was in the building when Tasha arrived is her friend Maria, who is another worker. And she had just come off her shift, and she was in the lobby area waiting for her ride.
Did you need something?
Yeah, actually, I think I left my charger here.
Tasha says that she can't find her cell phone charger. She thinks it might be there somewhere. So could she please look around? And he says sure.
Outside, Henry and Timothy stand by for Tasha to open the rear door. Inside, Tasha keeps the lost charger distraction going so she works her way toward the back. But there's a problem.
The night manager happened to look out a window, and he saw Henry and his cousin leaning up against a wall with their guns out like they were trying to hide.
And that's when Henry's perfect plan begins to fall apart. And what happens next will send Tasha's world into a death spiral.
What are you doing? Unlock it.
They thought that this was going to be easy in, easy out. I think they thought that anything like this would happen.
Henry was everything to her. She was willing to risk everything for him.
The two of them together were double trouble.
In Dallas, Texas, just a few months after 34-year-old Tasha Dunnigan is fired from her job at a massage parlor, she lets her boyfriend Henry Sanchez talk her into getting revenge via armed robbery.
There were very strong elements of control and dominance in this relationship. And so if Tasha really wanted to stay with him, there were just certain rules that she had to abide by. So I think that it really took her down a wrong path. I don't know if she would have normally done had she not been with him and in this relationship.
They're desperate for money, and in his mind, this is the perfect plan to come up with quick money.
With their plan underway, Tasha waits for the right opportunity to let her boyfriend and his cousin, Timothy Johnson, inside.
It might be in the bag. Yeah. We can check.
There were no customers there at that time. It was just the manager and one of the girls that worked there.
But out of the gate, Henry's plan starts to unravel.
The night manager had noticed Henry and Timothy outside, so he was suspicious.
Suspicious, the manager senses a security risk.
And to protect Tasha, he takes her to the back door to let her out safely.
He opens the back door and he looks out and he sees two guys coming toward him.
The night manager quickly slams the door shut and locks it.
When he turns around, he sees Tasha holding a gun to him.
What are you doing? Unlock it.
And he says, please don't do this.
Is this what you wanted to do, huh?
And he begs her to back down, and she does it.
Instead, the night manager pulls out his own gun.
Tasha was scared. Things weren't going the way they're supposed to.
Tasha panicked once the manager refused to comply with her demand to open the back door.
Henry was waiting for her to unlock the door, and she was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen.
Even if it means pulling the trigger.
The manager is shot in the stomach and he falls to the ground. At that point, Tasha runs away to let her accomplices in.
Tasha is so rattled at this point because she doesn't know whether the manager is alive or dead, and so the only thing she can focus on is making sure that Henry and Timothy can get into the back door. And whatever she does, she wants to make sure that Henry's plan is met to the letter.
Tasha, did you shoot him?
Tasha's former co-worker, Maria, watches in horror as the horrific scene unfolds in front of her.
She's hysterical.
Where's the money, man?
You know, she's really upset. She has no idea what was happening, and she now is a witness.
Where's the money, man? Come on. We're not joking, man.
The manager is wounded but still alive and takes cover.
I don't know where the money is.
He retreated to behind a counter that was there in the business, kind of used as a shield for himself.
Come on, man. Just give us the money.
With money on their mind, the robbers stick to the plan.
Henry and Timothy approach the manager and ask for the money.
I don't know where the money is.
And the manager says no, and they start a shootout.
When the bullets start flying, Maria cowers in fear.
So she was a liability. Timothy takes her into another room where he shoots her in the stomach.
Tasha's worst fears are coming true.
Tasha must have been scared out of her wits. She had so many things coming down on her.
Meanwhile, the gunfight between Henry and the manager spins out of control, and Henry is hit in the leg. The would-be robbers have no choice but to retreat empty-handed.
The whole plan had gone south. Henry was shot. He was bleeding profusely.
Still hidden behind the counter, the night manager calls 911.
I don't think they're expecting the night manager to defend himself or defend the business as ferociously as he did.
All right, drop
Timothy and Tasha get Henry back to the car.
We gotta get him to the hospital.
No, hospital, no.
Tasha gets behind the wheel, but tries desperately to keep her wits about her.
The one thing she was really scared of came true. People got hurt. The manager was shot, her coworker Maria was shot, and now her partner, her significant other Henry, was shot.
With Henry bleeding out, Tasha can barely keep the car on the road.
So they realized that Henry's condition was life-threatening, and it wasn't as easy as just running away. They had to seek medical assistance.
Tasha finds herself in a no-win situation.
No.
Yes.
No, hospital.
We have to go.
No.
Henry needs medical help. He's been shot in the leg, but at the same time, they need to hide from the police. So Tasha has a decision to make. Is this about her own safety and Henry not getting the medical attention, or getting Henry to a doctor or an emergency room at the peril of being caught?
This was not supposed to happen.
You gotta get to the hospital.
And do not go to the hospital.
He thought it would be an easy in and out job. Tasha did all of this in the end for the love of her man.
And later in Los Angeles, Connie Ikpo's man will give her a taste of the good life by having her make a deal with the devil.
So the minute she let Christopher in her life, she starts down this dark and narrow path.
This is a shell game, and Connie's an active participant. In fact, she's just all in.
Tasha Dunnigan has to choose between saving her boyfriend's life or getting away after a botched revenge robbery attempt in Dallas, Texas.
No hospital. This was not supposed to happen.
You gotta get to the hospital.
Against her accomplice Timothy's objections, Tasha drives straight to the emergency room.
Tasha wanted to save Henry no matter what the risk. If Tasha didn't care about Henry, she could have just taken him home and said, we'll try to get the bullet out.
I told you not to come here, Tasha.
We had to come.
No, just leave. Go somewhere else.
Nurse, please. Please.
No.
When they get to the hospital and pull over, Timothy flees. He runs.
That's when she realizes she's on her own.
Timothy knew that once they got to the hospital would call the police to report a gunshot victim.
Doctor, please help.
But Tasha doesn't care.
Tasha's emotional state at that point was primarily focused on getting Henry to the hospital and trying to make sure he doesn't die there in the car.
No, please help.
Tasha loved Henry, and she did everything for him, and he's the reason that she did this. So she wasn't going to let him die, but she also risked her life by deciding to save him.
Somebody tried to carjack us.
To cover their tracks, she lies to the hospital staff, saying they're the victims of a carjacking.
She's a survivor, so she comes up with an explanation as to what happened.
But what Tasha doesn't know is that the night manager at the massage parlor has survived, and he's called 911.
When the police arrive, they find Maria dead. The manager was able to identify Tasha and tell them exactly what happened.
I locked the door.
The manager was able to give the police her name and the description of the two men.
This description is almost identical to the report the hospital has already provided the authorities.
Henry has a gunshot wound, and it's hospital's protocol that when something like that happens, they automatically have to notify the police department.
At the crime scene, they get a report of 3 people showing up at the hospital, one of them with a serious gunshot wound, and they put 2 and 2 together pretty quickly.
By the time Henry is wheeled into surgery, Tasha is already in custody.
She chose to stay with Henry at the hospital. She knew they were probably going to get caught. I think that also kind of shows how deep her involvement with him was.
Tasha's whole world comes crumbling down on her because she doesn't know whether Henry's going to make it.
Why would you tell me the truth?
Under interrogation, Tasha stands her ground.
My car.
Tasha tries her best to stick to the carjacking story, but there's too many holes in the story.
I don't know. We were carjacked.
But the news of Maria's passing definitely hits a nerve.
Maria's dead, and Tasha doesn't know whether she's going to prison for this. So Tasha's got to be devastated.
Tasha was very remorseful about Maria getting killed. In fact, Tasha had talked about how good a friend Maria had been to her during the time that she worked there.
And police have one more ace up their sleeve.
When a police officer tells Tasha that the night manager identified her as the woman involved in the robbery, she breaks down.
Make sure the scene of the crime. Maybe I was there.
You know this.
After hours of questioning, Tasha finally admits to shooting the night manager at the massage parlor,
He drew a gun on me.
but claims that he drew his gun on her first.
She admitted to shooting him, but she said that she did it in self-defense.
I was going to leave out the back door.
And when push comes to shove, Tasha finally turns on her man.
This is all Henry's fault.
She points the blame on Henry because it was his idea, and he was the one who really started all of this. He was the one that convinced her of what happened and convinced her that they needed to seek revenge. And so she really blamed everything on him.
Like the night manager, Henry Sanchez survives his wounds and is arrested promptly after he is in stable condition. 2 days later, police track down Timothy Johnson hiding out in a Dallas motel.
The police had gotten a tip from someone on where he was, and that's where they found him.
A year after the robbery, a Dallas jury convicts Tasha Dunnigan of capital murder. She's handed down a tough punishment: life in prison without parole. Her boyfriend Henry Sanchez and his cousin Timothy Johnson each get the same.
This was really about her relationship with Henry. Under other circumstances, I don't know if she would have done this on her own. So she really did it all for him.
Tasha felt like she had to do what Henry wanted her to do. She wanted to please him, keep him happy, and he was just a very bad influence on her.
So many women get involved in bad situations. They do things for what they think is love, and they ruin other people's lives and they ruin their own lives.
Prison has a way of allowing people to think. I mean, after all, you have nothing but time on your hands.
And I walked to the back. He walked with me.
She was now far removed from that very domineering, dominating relationship that she was in with Henry. So she finally does come to the proper realization that he led her down a path of danger and a really screwed up life.
Trying to keep her boyfriend happy with a fistful of cash destroyed Tasha Dunnigan's life. In Los Angeles, Connie Ikpo is all about getting money for nothing in the name of everlasting love. Even from a young age, Connie seemed destined to be an overachiever.
Connie was raised in Nigeria, a very hardworking single-parent mother who raised her kids to be very hardworking. They were very pressed on getting an education, which they all seem to do.
By her early 20s, Connie becomes a nurse in Nigeria, helping those in need.
She was industrious. She was well-liked. She was a hard worker.
A decade later, Connie yearns for more. And during a fateful trip to America, she decides to take a leap of faith in Houston, Texas.
She came to visit a cousin of hers who was living there, and she got interest in wanting to stay, enrolling in a university there.
The 35-year-old immediately gets to work, building a whole new life for herself by continuing her education in the healthcare field.
She was confident, she was responsible. She was in school for something all the time, whether it was a bachelor's degree, which she needed to get here in the United States, or her master's degree, which she did complete.
Connie is like a lot of immigrants who come to this country. They come for a better opportunity. She knows what she wants. She knows what she has to do, even if it means working harder than her peers.
But Connie's also determined to enjoy her new life by spending time with friends and relatives. And it's during one of these gatherings where Connie is introduced to a fellow Nigerian who's in town visiting from California.
Christopher was a Nigerian citizen, migrated to the United States, seemed to be somewhat successful in the hair salon business in Los Angeles.
The two instantly bond over their mutual desire to help those less fortunate.
They both were in the same community circles. He was doing volunteer work, which certainly appealed to Connie's nurturing caregiving side.
You did this when you were in Nigeria?
Connie's attracted to Christopher primarily because they share the same culture. They both come from Nigeria. He's been in the States longer than she has, so he's already started working and making something of himself. He's achieved some success. And for her, this is the ideal guy. This is a man who is ambitious just like she is.
Shortly after their first meeting, Christopher returns to LA. But the distance only makes their love grow stronger.
They had a long-distance telephonic relationship for a number of months and other subsequent visits. Finally, she moved to Los Angeles and they moved in together.
He immediately proposes. They go back to Nigeria to be married, and then they come back to LA to begin their lives.
Connie quickly settles into her new life with Christopher. She takes a job as a nurse, and Christopher continues to run his successful hair salons. But the couple isn't satisfied with just achieving their own personal success. They want to make a difference in the world.
Christopher and Connie were already very well respected in their communities.
And Christopher already knows how he wants to give back. He tells Connie he wants them to become ordained ministers and open a storefront church.
They convert one of the salons into their church. Connie likes the idea of becoming a pastor.
People called them Pastor Chris and Pastor Connie. And the name of their church was Arms of Grace Church.
But when Connie puts her faith in her man over God, her sins will destroy her life forever.
Christopher and Connie are not the angels that they thought they were.
And their church will become the perfect cover for a $1 million bamboozle, for which Satan himself would be proud.
This scheme was driven by unadulterated greed.
Nigerian immigrant Connie Ikpo is living the American dream in Los Angeles, California. Not only has she married the love of her life, Christopher Iruke, but her husband is determined to share their good fortune through a storefront ministry.
It was a church that opened its arms up to a community that was in need. A community that looked like people that were coming from that part of the third world, coming from Africa, coming from Latin America, looking for a church home.
And Connie works around the clock to make sure nothing in her life falls through the cracks.
Connie was busy doing everything. She's busy at work. She's busy with the church, doing food drives. She's trying to do it all.
There's a part of Connie who wants to prove to Christopher that she can do the hard work. So she's doing everything that she can to get this church up and going, because at the end of the day, she really wants to please him.
2 years after the church opens its doors, the pews are packed.
God is good, not just Sunday. God is good.
And the couple adds to their responsibilities by bringing a new addition into the family.
Connie and Christopher, they had a girl that they adopted from Nigeria. They're both working. They have the church. And on top of that, they're trying to raise a child. And they're making it all look easy.
So easy that Christopher decides to start a ministry to serve those with disabilities. A healthcare company named Pascon.
The medical supply company that Christopher opens actually provides medical supplies to folks that need them.
It's the same community which their church serves as well. For Christopher, it's synergy. With his skilled wife at his side, Christopher is confident that Pascon will be a success.
There's a lot going on in Connie's life and certainly a lot on her plate. She does want to help the community, but even more importantly, she wants to help her man. She wants to help Christopher reach his vision.
Their main customers are Medicare beneficiaries.
Medicare is typically for those that are of low or below income and that do not have medical insurance or over the age of 65.
At first, the business seems to stall.
Any new business typically will have a slow start because you're brand new, no one knows you're there.
But then as word gets out, the customers begin to trickle in. And the company's biggest ticket item is a powered wheelchair with a hefty $6,000 price tag.
If I was a member of the community and I had medical insurance, I could go to Connie or Chris and say that I have been prescribed to have a wheelchair. And can you get that for me?
Now, to need a power wheelchair, you need to have serious medical conditions. It needs to be based on the prescription of a doctor who thinks that you need it.
To capitalize on their most profitable item, Christopher starts purchasing large quantities of these wheelchairs at wholesale prices.
They get a wheelchair for $1,000 wholesale. They pay another $1,000, and then Medicaid reimburses them $6,000 for the actual chair itself, and they end up pocketing the remainder of that money.
Thank you. All right. Welcome, sir. I'll see you soon. All right.
And Christopher starts seeing a profit of thousands of dollars a wheelchair. In fact, the venture is doing so well that Christopher wants to open a second company, and he wants Connie at its helm as sole owner and CEO.
Connie opened up the second company called Horizon, which did the same exact business. She was the 100% owner, the manager, the operator of it.
And between the two companies, over the next year, the money starts rolling in.
They bought a nice house in a very nice neighborhood in Los Angeles. They both drove nice Mercedes. They sent money overseas to buy real estate.
It is the American dream. So everything seems to be going just the way they want it to go.
You go from going to work every day as a nurse to becoming a millionaire. Very drastic lifestyle change.
Connie couldn't be happier with their newfound fortune. But behind their success, the couple is hiding a dirty little secret.
As it turns out, it's all a scam. They are committing a fraud.
Christopher has figured out how to make that money, and Connie's gotten a taste of the good life, and now she is hooked. So now she is going to follow her husband's lead.
Can investigators bring their ride on Easy Street to a dead end before they cover their tracks? Los Angeles church leaders Connie Ikpo and Christopher Iruke live the good life after opening two successful medical supply companies.
They provide in mobile wheelchairs, and they would submit those claims to Medicare.
For each wheelchair, they're making $4,000. Over time, this is millions of dollars. And it looks to everyone as they're building an empire.
But what these angelic entrepreneurs have really built is a house of lies.
They are committing a fraud. They are selling wheelchairs to people who just don't need them.
It was a get-rich scheme by ripping off Medicare, which operates on the honor system and is vulnerable to disreputable people.
While they keep up their appearances at their church, they no longer keep up the facade of the medical supply company.
It was a medical supply company that had no walk-in clients, no cash register, not the type of thing that you would expect to see if they had a legitimate business supplying medical supplies to the public.
It's a complicated scheme that works in two demographics. First, the couple lies to potential patients, conning them into buying wheelchairs that they don't need.
They would tell community members that Medicare was going bankrupt, and so that they would not be able to meet their immediate medical needs, and they may want to go ahead and buy a wheelchair now.
Some patients did receive the wheelchair. When you would go to their house to look at it, it would typically be parked in the garage or a corner of the house, collecting dust and never having been used.
And if their targets can't be persuaded to actually purchase a chair, they pay them for their personal information.
A lot of times they would also, just in exchange for their name and social security number, buy them things that they needed.
Even worse, they're taking advantage of the same group of people they claim to be helping, poor immigrants, many of which are members of their own congregation.
There's a number of things that made them so easy to convince. There was a language barrier. They're immigrants. They're not really familiar with how processes work. They're pastors in the church, and that they're from a vulnerable population. Someone that is very respected in your community asks you, then of course you're going to comply.
In phase 2, Christopher buys up bogus prescriptions from shady doctors to submit to Medicare.
Doctors are being paid who are signing off on these false prescriptions.
Once people start getting large amounts of money from Medicare just by filling out some fraudulent paperwork and delivering wheelchairs, it's a lot of money really quickly, and it's hard to stop.
And it isn't just Christopher getting his hands dirty. Connie is supporting her man's illegal deeds every step of the way.
She was just as involved, submitting the documents that she needed, which means that she's fully aware that she's paying a middle person for the prescription.
In Connie's mind, she can justify what's going on with this illegal activity. They're sending money back to family in Nigeria, and they're making a difference in their community.
Over the next 3 years, the couple continues to preach about sin, but committed on a regular basis. And it's their blatant disregard for appearances that finally puts their medical supply businesses on investigators' radar.
As you dig into some of these companies, indicators of fraud become apparent. For example, a company that's only delivering one type of equipment, as in this case, the most expensive possible equipment, power wheelchairs, and not delivering manual wheelchairs, canes, walkers, other types of things that you would expect to see a legitimate company to supply. They were finding trouble with the billings, and they were questioning the necessity of the wheelchairs that they were being delivered.
The investigators begin looking for proof, prescriptions, that all of these wheelchairs are attached to people who truly need them.
With investigators hot on their heels, Connie and Christopher will stop at nothing to protect their lavish lifestyle.
It was too late now for Connie to back out. She was now entangled in a web of lies.
I don't think she was willing to get caught.
Pastors Connie Ikpo and Christopher Iruke's Medicare scam has made them millions of dollars. And the couple is desperate to keep living the dream in Los Angeles.
Chris Iruke and Connie Ikpo were greedy, and they wanted to get as much money as possible, and they weren't going to let the Medicare rules and regulations or anything else get in their way.
Connie's got a lot to lose. She's worked so hard for everything, and she's afraid of losing all of that. But more importantly, she's afraid of losing Christopher. And that's why she's gone along with that scam.
Alerted that Medicare officials are on the lookout for them, Connie and Christopher try to stay one step ahead of investigators.
They begin to now understand that they are really being scrutinized and that they now are going to have to begin to do some things to keep themselves out of jail.
Panicked, the couple closes the businesses in an attempt to throw investigators off their trail. But they aren't about to turn their back on their millions.
After shutting down Pascon and Horizon, Christopher opens up 2 new stores and just picks up where he left off.
They know that they can't put the new companies in their names, so they cover their tracks and recruit others into their scheme.
They use 2 names from members of parishioners of their church.
They open a new storefront and get back to business as usual.
It's a cat and mouse game. They're trying to avoid getting caught, and they do that by operating under different ownership. Medicare would have no way of knowing, based on the paperwork, that these were all Christopher Iruke and Connie Ikpo's company. They would appear to be other people's companies who don't have the same issues.
And that, again, is another scam.
Connie really should put her foot down, but instead, she's just going to blindly follow along with this scheme.
For the next 6 months, the plan seems to work, until Christopher gets a call from one of his employees.
An investigator shows up to the medical supply store asking for Chris. Of course, the folks that are there give him no information whatsoever, but do get word to Chris that there is an investigator that's looking for him.
Christopher calls an emergency meeting with their co-conspirators in a park down the street from his house. He's got to figure out how to cover their tracks.
They give them instructions about not to talk to the police. They give them what we would call throw phones. They come up with code words.
Christopher orders everyone to use their untraceable phones and not to tell police. But what he isn't aware of is investigators have been digging into the couple's lies.
Myself and the agents would go interview some of these beneficiaries who bought wheelchairs, and they would do jumping jacks for us. And so these aren't the types of people that need the power wheelchairs.
A week later, investigators prepare to strike. And Connie and Christopher realize the clock is running out. So they try to erase any evidence connecting them to the scam.
At some point, the medical records were all moved into the church.
Connie spearheads the shredding party. She gathers parishioners and pays them to begin shredding files.
If they get caught, not only is she going to lose this lifestyle that she's become accustomed to, but she's going to lose her man, and that's something that is not on the table for her.
But the feds are waiting. After months of watching them, with a search warrant, they raid the church.
And they seized all the records, including the shredded documents.
Finally, Connie Ikpo and Christopher Iruke are arrested and charged with Medicare fraud.
Connie and Chris have never admitted to their crimes. They both have maintained their innocence.
6 months after her arrest, Connie is convicted of conspiracy to commit fraud and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Christopher is also convicted of conspiracy to commit fraud and 17 counts of healthcare fraud. He's sentenced to 15 years in prison.
They both are responsible for $6.7 million, I believe, to reimburse the government.
Connie took a vow to honor her husband for richer and for poorer, and she took that oath very seriously.
Christopher is the one that led her down this path. He introduced her to the business of Medicare fraud, and I don't think she would have thought of this on her own.
Everybody loved Connie. So obviously this would be a grave shock to the community that she supported for so long.
She certainly at any time could have stopped. She could have shut the whole thing down, but she chose not to. I think the true victims are, unfortunately, the community members of their church and the government.
Nhìn kỹ bây giờ thấy máu của xe cũng gần hết rồi này.
On the love of her life.
He was so charming. He seemed almost too good to be true.
But once his true colors are revealed, she's in too deep to get out.
What she saw on that page just put her over the edge.
She was in a fight or flight situation. You see your first exit and you take it.
And later, Melanie Costantini moves to Sin City with her high school sweetheart in search of a fresh start.
Melanie loved Anthony, and she would have done anything to keep her family together.
But when the bills pile up, her man sets up a diabolical plan.
This actually became a robbery at this point. They were demanding money with a weapon.
They just wanted more piece of the pie without earning the piece of the pie.
There are hundreds of thousands of women in prison at any given time in the U.S. These are the true stories of women who committed heinous crimes in the name of love. For my man. Colorado Springs teen Marissa Middleton is no stranger to trouble.
Marissa was not your typical teenager. Her focus was not on her education. She spent more time in the streets than she did at home or anywhere else.
She dropped out of high school. She was headed down the wrong path.
Unemployed with only a 10th grade education, Marissa mooches off her parents for financial support. And the former sophomore continues her wild child ways for the next few years. By the time she turns 19, she leaves her parents' house and stays with friends as her downward spiral gets worse.
In fact, within a year of moving out from her parents' home, she was arrested for passing a bad check.
Getting arrested is certainly a wake-up call that one is headed down the wrong path.
After her arrest, she moves back to her parents' home and gets a job to support herself. But after 6 years of trying to live a straight and narrow life, the now 26-year-old decides she needs a change of scenery.
She left Colorado and moved to Manhattan, Kansas.
Marissa could start all over. She could become a brand new person if she wanted to be.
Moving to a new town is certainly a way to start one's life over again. It adds a form of excitement in that it's different from the same old, same old. It's fresh, it's exciting, it's new.
She quickly falls in love with her new home and enjoys that there's always something to do. To spark up her social life in her new town, she gets a job as a bartender at a local strip club.
It's a college town, so it's got its fair amount of bars and whatnot.
From all appearances, she was doing well there. She was able to make ends meet by working at the strip club.
She was socializing with the patrons. She was making new friends. She was making a name for herself.
As her new circle grows, she is particularly drawn to one man who frequents the club, 28-year-old Larry Anderson.
They hung out a lot. She enjoyed spending time with him and thought he was a great guy.
Larry was handsome. He had a bright smile, slick talker. As time went on, they got to know each other. They talked more and more.
The couple date for a few weeks, going out to movies, dinners, and drinks, with Larry footing the bill at every outing.
Larry seemed like a modern-day Prince Charming. And Marissa had never even asked him about, what he did for a living.
Marissa had had a pretty hard life. And when she met this guy, Larry, who was willing to shower her with attention and spoil her, she was quickly head over heels.
But after dating for only a month, her Prince Charming's constant flow of cash sparks her curiosity.
She was wondering where his money was coming from.
She'd ask, but never got a direct answer from Larry.
Then one day, while hanging out around Manhattan, he reveals his secret. According to Marissa,
a lot of people that live in Junction City either work or are soldiers on Fort Riley. So those Fort Riley soldiers made up a large portion of his clientele for his escort service.
Even though she acknowledges her new man's way to earn a living, it's still a tough pill to swallow. To set her mind more at ease, Larry loops her in to how his little empire operates.
And she was right there by his side, ride or die to the end. She made numerous trips from Manhattan to Junction City, and she was with him when he answered calls and supervised the girls.
As time goes on, she has lingering questions in her mind about his relationship with some of the women he works with.
When Marissa would travel to Junction City with Larry, she would notice that some of the girls got a little too close for comfort, and she did not like that.
She became bothered by the girls' familiarity with Larry. She became bothered by the fact that they would call him and talk to him, that they would dress scantily in front of him.
If you're insecure, you might second-guess someone who has proven themselves to be really trustworthy and honest to you, but your own insecurity really makes you think twice as to what may be going on.
As Marissa's anxieties grow, her relationship with Larry becomes strained, and the couple begins to argue.
Marissa confronted Larry about what she suspected with the girls, and Larry just straight out denied it. He said there was no dealing other than business with the girls.
But no matter how bad their fights get, the two always manage to fall back in each other's arms. And with Larry's work keeping him 25 miles away in Junction City most of the time, she quits her job in Manhattan and moves in with Larry to keep her boy toy company. But oftentimes she finds herself alone while he's working.
She didn't have a lot to keep her busy. Fortunately, she met a couple also stationed at Fort Riley, Chantrell and Drexel Woody, and they became instant friends.
Larry came into the mix, and all four of them would spend time together.
With Larry's business keeping him busy at all hours, Marissa shares her anxieties surrounding her man and his stable.
Chantrell and Drexel, they would reassure her and comfort her and just pretty much dismiss the claims and just tell her nothing's going on.
Sometimes people need to be reassured verbally in order to feel better about themselves and their own insecurities.
But Marissa's jealousy continues to fester in her mind, and she uses social may be spot on.
She found comments made by Amanda Clemens, and she said on social media that they had been sleeping together.
What Marissa found on Amanda's page just crushed her view of the perfect world that she and Larry were to share.
With so much personal information that's on social media, it's really possible for someone to become a potential stalking victim and not even know about it.
Later that night, Marissa confronts her boyfriend about Amanda's remarks, and he denies ever being intimate with her. But her anger is too far gone to be reeled in.
She wanted to be the only important woman in Larry's life.
Marissa had made up her mind, and there was no stopping her.
Marissa Middleton suspects her boyfriend of 1 month, Larry Anderson, is sleeping with one of his employees. The woman in question, Amanda Clemens, doesn't hide the alleged liaison when she puts it out there for the world to see.
It was almost as though she were taunting Marissa with her social media posts. Marissa saw it and just couldn't handle it. She was beside herself.
She confronts her boyfriend, to which he denies ever hooking up with the lady of the night. Enraged, Marissa decides to punish the woman spreading stories about her man.
She had in her head that Amanda, she needed to be taught a lesson, and she was going to teach that lesson.
Quite often when someone is in a relationship and they feel that that person is the one, they'll go to incredible lengths in order to keep that relationship and make sure no one else is getting involved in that relationship.
Full of rage, Marissa vows revenge on Amanda for making up such lies. With Larry on board, the two head over to their friends Drexel and Chantrell Woody's home to enlist their help.
Because Drexel had never met Amanda and she didn't know who he was, the plan was for him to pretend to be a client, or at least get Amanda to invite him to a very specific location.
With a strategy in place, Drexel makes the call to Amanda, which she readily accepts. Excited by the promise of 2 women about to battle it out for him, Larry won't be left behind, and the 3 drive to the hotel while Chantrell stays at home. When they arrive, Drexel knocks on the hotel room door while Marissa and Larry stay out of sight.
Thank you, thank you. Drexel interacted with Amanda for some time. They discussed various things that she would be willing to do for him, and then he told her he had to get money out of his car. What's going on? Before he could leave the room, Marissa and Larry walk in.
The second that Marissa saw Amanda in the room, she jumped on her. She started beating her, fighting, scratching, clunked, pulled her hair. She was full on attack mode.
Sometimes when a person is overcome with anger, instead of confronting the situation in a peaceful or constructive way, they just can't help themselves and respond in many ways through violence.
While the 2 women go at it, Larry stands off to the side, with Drexel watching his girlfriend's fury.
He didn't lay a hand to break them apart or to stop the violence.
I think Larry was a bit flattered by the attention. I think Larry liked the idea that these 2 women were fighting over him.
After watching the 2 fight for a few minutes, Larry finally pulls them apart and orders Amanda to hand over some money she shorted him.
Larry started claiming that Amanda owed him $300. She only had about $150.
Unable to produce the full amount owed, Larry drags Amanda to the car, and the group drives back to Drexel's house.
Amanda didn't know what was going to happen next. She was scared, and she knew she had no control and no say other than to go where they took her.
When they got back to the house on post, Chantrell was shocked to see Amanda with them. Amanda and Marissa engage in this back and forth about Larry and who had had a relationship with him.
The 2 women battle it out, kicking and screaming at each other.
Marissa was physically attacking Amanda. At some point in that altercation, Marissa fell and hit her head.
She was still mad at Amanda. She's still on her case. And she even told her that she could work off her debt to Larry by getting another trick. Amanda was becoming more and more afraid and wondering when or if she was going to get out of there.
Amanda agrees to get another client to pay her debt, but begs Marissa to let her make a quick call to check on her son. The battled attacker reluctantly agrees, but keeps a watchful eye on her. The single mother makes the call, but instead of talking to her son, her mom picks up the phone.
Her mother could hear that she was crying and that she was upset.
Amanda becomes emotional hearing her mom's voice. She suspects that her daughter is in trouble and asks if she should call for help. Amanda replies with a yes and hangs up the phone.
Amanda's mom knew something was not right. Immediately, she contacted the police, and the police, not knowing where to find Amanda, called her cell phone.
The police called the phone number back to see if she was okay.
Marissa snatches the phone from Amanda before she can give the cops their whereabouts and disconnects the call. Aware that the police are now involved, the group scrambles to come up with a new plan.
I think their main focus was to hide. The police were looking for him.
But there's one person standing in their way.
They knew that if they let Amanda go, that she could identify them, that she could tell them exactly who they were, and that she could tell the police exactly what had happened and how they had attacked her and assaulted her.
They knew what it would mean for Amanda to get away. They had to realize they had gone too far, and now there was no turning back. Amanda had to be silenced permanently.
When people start to panic, bad decisions inevitably are made, and the situation just spirals out of control.
Larry, Marissa, and Drexel force Amanda in the back of the car and drive to a remote bridge near Geary County, 20 minutes away, while Chantrell once again remains at the house. According to Larry's plea deal, Marissa continued on her violent path.
Once they got to the bridge, Marissa immediately gets out of the car, drags Amanda out of the car, and starts beating her up again. They engage in a physical altercation where Amanda's fighting back and trying to get away.
Amanda is able to get out of Marissa's hold and runs. She comes up to the side of the bridge and looks down.
She was scared for her life. She knew that if she didn't get away, this was going to be the end.
And later, a teen mom looking to keep her family afloat takes things over the edge.
She was just in survival mode at this point.
Any threat to her family was an obstacle that needed to be taken out.
Just give us a checkbox.
Marissa Middleton has Amanda Clemens trapped on a bridge with nowhere to go, outside of Junction City, Kansas, after the call girl claims sexual relations with her boyfriend, Larry Anderson.
Amanda was scared. She knew she had only one way out, and that way was the bridge that she was on. And she jumped.
When she jumped off the bridge, she fell 15 to 16 feet and landed on the embankment.
Amanda miraculously survives the fall and tries to get up. But this is where her luck runs out. According to Larry's plea deal, Marissa starts to violently attack Amanda yet again. Only this time, she has a weapon.
She thought she had a chance to get away. Then she realized her ankle was broken and she couldn't run. And before she knew it, Marissa was right there on top of her, just as angry, but this time with a knife.
With eyes full of rage, Marissa swings the knife at the injured woman.
She tried to slit her throat, but because of their size difference, she wasn't able to do that.
According to Larry's plea deal, he sees that his girlfriend is having a hard time fighting off Amanda. So he steps in. Larry, Marissa, and Drexel run down to stop Amanda, armed with a knife.
Larry approached, took the knife from Marissa, and he's the one that actually killed Amanda.
As Amanda's lifeless body lay on the ground, her three captors make no effort to cover their brutal crime.
They just walked away. They left her body on the embankment.
The trio head back to Drexel's house, where they attempt to get rid of anything that can track the murder back to them.
They did their best to clean up the evidence of what had happened. Chantrell and Marissa did their best to wash away evidence.
Larry and Drexel destroy Amanda's cell phone. They wanted no evidence that Amanda had been with them that day.
While the group is covering their tracks, police are already trying to solve the mystery of Amanda's disappearance. Their big break comes 2 days later, when they find Amanda's body under the bridge 6 miles outside of Junction City. Investigators search the area, but come up empty-handed. Next, they turn their attention to Amanda's friends to see if they have any idea who could have done this.
By talking to her associates, they managed to connect Amanda with Larry.
They tracked Larry down to his apartment where they found him with Marissa.
The couple is brought down to the station for questioning, where they both deny involvement in the murder. But police continue to pry, and eventually Marissa and Larry break down and confess. Although their loyalty to each other has seen its limits.
Larry told police that it was Marissa who inflicted the stab that killed Amanda. And Marissa told police that it was Larry who...
There's some sort of pressure, especially when we're talking law enforcement. Sometimes they'll just turn on one another.
After several hours of questioning, Marissa finally comes clean.
Marissa told the police that she thought it was her job to teach Amanda a lesson for two reasons. One, she owed Larry money, and two, she was telling lies about her relationship with Larry.
She also admits to police that their friends, Chantrell and Drexel Woody, helped out with their plan. Police track the couple down and arrest them for kidnapping resulting in death. They each admit to their part and plead guilty to the charges against them. Drexel Woody is sentenced to 16 years in prison and 5 years of supervised release. Chantrell's sentence is still pending. Larry Anderson is charged with 1 count of kidnapping resulting in death. He pleads guilty and is sentenced to 28 years in prison. As for Marissa Middleton, she pleads guilty to conspiracy to commit kidnapping resulting in death. She is sentenced to 28 years in prison. In the end, Marissa let her jealousy and anger consume her thoughts that caused her ultimate downfall.
I think Marissa felt like Amanda was a threat to this dream that she had of a life with Larry, and was determined to do whatever she needed to do to get her out of the way.
People who are amped up on their emotions tend to lose focus, tend to lose perspective, and end up hurting not just other people, but even themselves.
Marissa lost everything. She lost hope for love, hope for a future. She lost her youth. She lost her freedom. She lost it all for a man.
Marissa Middleton's heightened emotions took her down a dark path that turned deadly. Next, over 1,200 miles away in Las Vegas, Melanie Costantini is determined to do anything she can to keep her family together. Growing up in Katy, Texas, 16-year-old Melanie Costantini's future is on a solid path to success.
She was a straight A student. She had her whole life ahead of her, and she wanted to go to college one day.
Melanie loved kids and was hoping to work with them in the future.
Popular with her classmates, Melanie is well liked by her peers and has her fair share of admirers. But there's only one guy that catches her eye, fellow classmate Anthony Steiger.
Anthony was the strapping football player, basically muscle from head to toe.
Melanie and Anthony were immediately attracted to each other. They both thought each other was smart, attractive, outgoing, sociable, so they immediately clicked. They hit it off right away.
It doesn't take long before the two start dating. But by their junior year, Anthony gets in trouble with the law for theft.
He received deferred adjudication in relation to the theft of a firearm and a stolen vehicle.
Basically, he has to stay out of trouble during that time until he's an adult, and he'll never see any prison time.
When you see a juvenile getting in trouble, even in high school, that usually is a red flag or some sort of a foretelling as to a path that they're going to follow, which is one of trouble down the road.
Despite his troubles, Melanie is still head over heels with the good-looking athlete.
These two were young and in love. She just chose to stand by him and support him, whatever he was going through.
A year later, the couple is still going strong, but their plans for a happily ever after hit a snag after Melanie gets some life-altering news.
She became pregnant. before they were graduated from high school.
It was something that they weren't prepared for. Now they were dealt with having to have a child together.
With the surprising news, the two teens are about to go on a roller coaster ride to ensure they stay together.
Complete chaos ensued. There was a violent struggle, and the situation quickly went out of control.
Melanie loved Anthony, and there was nothing that she wouldn't have done for him.
Sweethearts Melanie Costantini and Anthony Steiger hit a bump in the road when the 17-year-old senior gets pregnant.
This was an unplanned pregnancy, and they decided to go ahead and have the child.
Anthony put his big boy pants on, decided to go ahead and propose to her, which is admirable for him. The two decided that they weren't going to get married until they both graduated.
The following year, the young lovers tied the knot in front of Melanie's family and their new baby girl by their side.
Melanie's family supported the couple to the extent where Melanie and Anthony lived in Melanie's family's house.
Probably at this time, they were trying to figure out, what are we going to do? What's our next step?
When a young couple, for example, teen parents, are forced to raise their child, not only do they have to prove it to themselves, but they have to prove it to others that they can actually raise that child and provide safely for him or her.
To support the family, Anthony works as an auto mechanic, while Melanie continues to put in time at her mom's daycare facility. 2 years later, the young family know they can't live with Melanie's parents forever. And, as luck would have it, Anthony receives a new career opportunity.
Anthony received an offer to move to Las Vegas and work as a handyman in an apartment complex. And he was offered $400 per month and a free apartment in the complex.
They were able to get out of their parents' roof and get their own freedom. And who wouldn't want to come to Las Vegas to, actually start their new life and have free rent?
The family of three move into their new Las Vegas apartment without a hitch. But once they have settled into their new home, they immediately feel the financial restraints from moving to Sin City.
Obviously, $400 a month is not going to meet the budget of a household of two growing adults and a child. And yeah, they had free rent, but he needed another job, or she was going to have to work.
I know. Money coming in. It's not like we're spending it, I'm saving everything that
I believe that Anthony really did not take into consideration what the actual move would take. He didn't really take into consideration the cost of raising a family in another city.
It just wasn't enough. They were living paycheck to paycheck and trying to support their child.
Putting in long hours and still not being able to make ends meet can really put a strain on a relationship. And quite often, it's just so much easier in some people's minds to take shortcuts to making up that money that they weren't able to make in the first place.
To help make ends meet, Melanie takes a part-time job at a clothing store. With Melanie now working, they are in dire need of a new car. So with the little money they do have, they manage to secure financing for one.
They obtained a very high-interest loan and got a dark blue four-door sedan on payment plan.
It wasn't easy for Anthony and Melanie to get that car. The insurance rates were high, and Anthony actually had to borrow $80 from a friend of his just to take the car home.
How much?
Kept butting their heads against the wall, and they kept wanting to make more money, but the jobs that they were in were not allowing them to advance.
Money is the #1 stressor in most relationships, and not being able to make an adequate amount of money can lead to that relationship breaking down. As I like to say, no money, no honey.
4 months after moving to Vegas, the couple continue to live on a tight budget. While things seem to be going well for Melanie at her job, tensions rise between Anthony and his landlord boss, Harold Schilberg, who also lives in the building.
Harold would not really acknowledge Anthony's requests. There were many things around the apartment complex that Anthony wanted to repair and wanted to fix, and Harold would just not spend the money. He was against it.
Anthony also wanted more money to provide for his family, and that was something that Harold refused to do too.
Financially strapped, Melanie and Anthony discuss how to make a quick buck and decide that stealing money from their landlord, who owns not one, but 2 apartment buildings in the area, might be an easy solution.
I'm not sure when
Anthony started to see him as being the means to their end. He started to plot at this time, maybe taking that money from Harold.
Anthony started to search online, quickest ways to kill, quiet ways to kill someone, cutting someone's throat, and screaming.
He works to perfect their scheme for the next month, while waiting for the perfect opportunity to carry out his devious plan. Then, one day, Melanie and Anthony are in their apartment with their sleeping 2-year-old when Harold knocks on their door. Shortly after his arrival, an argument ensues between Anthony and Harold.
They start arguing with each other about the repairs that needed to be done at the complex.
The stove isn't working, the cabinets are broken, there's a leak in the ceiling.
Harold actually responds to Anthony and tells them that it's not going to happen.
The place was good enough for the last couple that was here. It's good enough for you.
Anthony gets very frustrated by his response.
The verbal argument turns physical as Melanie moves to pull the 2 scuffling men apart. Once they separate, Anthony and Melanie demand that Harold turn over his checkbooks.
Just give us a checkbook. When Harold refused to pass over his checkbooks, Anthony then looks at an electric saw, and he tells Harold that if he doesn't comply with them, he will kill him.
The situation became out of control, and it became a life or death struggle between the 2.
In the sweltering desert heat of Las Vegas, Melanie Costantini's husband, Anthony Steiger, violently struggles with his boss, Harold Schilberg. Using a sawzall as a weapon, the 2 men are in a fight to the death after Harold refuses to hand over his checkbooks.
As you can imagine, this was a horrific scene. We have an electric saw going. Anthony is taking swings at Harold. He actually hits him on the head. He actually hits him on the side of his face.
While this fight is breaking out, Melanie is standing by and probably worrying about her daughter, who is sleeping in the next room.
The 2 men continue to fight throughout the apartment. Harold tries to get away from Anthony and the saw, but the 58-year-old is no match for the younger man.
The fight ended up in the bathroom, where Anthony was able to take full control of the saw and make a large cut on Harold's neck.
Once Harold got cut, he just bled to death.
Surprisingly, the couple's daughter did not wake up during this entire situation. And if she had woken up, it could have been very traumatic for her.
Sometimes individuals see violence as a means to an end. And when they get into that mindset, they don't care how many people they hurt. They just want to get their mission accomplished by any means necessary.
As Harold's lifeless body lay in the tub, Melanie springs into action.
She reached into Harold's pocket and grabbed the keys to his apartment. Her and Anthony immediately ran to Harold's apartment to search for checks that they could later cash. It seems at this moment that they felt that their plan was working out for them.
All right, you take over there. Look on the cabinet.
Oftentimes in the heat of the moment, adrenaline kicks in, that fight or flight, and people do whatever they think is necessary in order to get what they want.
With blank checks in hand, the couple returns to their apartment, relieved that their daughter is still sleeping.
I'm gonna go to the truck right
After changing out of his bloody shirt to prepare what he needs to get rid of Harold's body, Anthony leaves the apartment again. With Harold's lifeless body still in the bathroom, Melanie gets on her laptop and begins to search for information on using forged checks from his bank.
After she figured out where she can cash those checks, she decided it was time to clean up the crime scene. She went into the bathroom and scrubbed that down, and that's where most of the blood was.
The adrenaline rush just doesn't last that long. And so when it does wear off and you come to your senses and realize that what you did was illegal, well, now you're in cover-up mode and you realize the totality of your actions.
Meanwhile, Anthony goes to a local truck rental facility half a mile away.
He told an employee that he needed a big box to put his shoes in, and the employee gave him a wardrobe box. So Anthony ended up leaving the truck facility with a wardrobe box, tape, a storage unit, and the truck that had a dolly in it as well.
He then raced home, left the keys in the truck, left the truck running, and went upstairs to help Melanie put the body in the box and get it into the truck.
The couple begins to dismember Harold's body so they can box it up, but they have a hard time doing so.
They're using that electric saw that they used to cut him, and they realized that it just wasn't strong enough to cut Harold's body.
It's not working.
All they could manage to get off of the body was the tip of his thumb. So they decided to put the body as a whole into the wardrobe box and move it out of the apartment.
The huge box is too heavy for the couple to lift alone, so they use the rental dolly and head out the door. But as they make their trek outside their apartment, something stops them in their tracks.
With those sirens?
Obviously, these two are scared out of their mind.
The couple's mental state was out of whack at that point. They were panicking.
Melanie Costantini and Anthony Steiger's plan to get rid of Harold Schilberg's body comes to a screeching halt when they hear police sirens just blocks away from their apartment building.
They freeze. They're very scared about what's about to happen, and they assumed that the police sirens were police looking for them.
The couple panics and run back to their apartment, leaving the truck running with Harold's body outside. Melanie quickly changes as Anthony stuffs a few belongings and Harold's blank checks in a bag. They grab their sleeping daughter and take off in their car.
Most times when you do something bad, eventually the guilt starts to kick in and you'll do anything to get yourself out of trouble.
Their ultimate plan was to take the body in the box and take it back to the storage facility where they would keep it in a storage room. And now, instead of having a well-planned crime, they've left the body behind in a box to be discovered, and they're on the run, which was not part of their plan.
When people are in a crisis situation and they're completely overwhelmed by whatever's going on, they tend to run away in order to save their own hides.
Later that evening, with their 2-year-old daughter in tow, the young parents drive towards California, where Anthony's mom lives. Their hope is to drop their child off with her while they go into hiding. But along the way, they make a pit stop to cash a few of Harold's checks for some spending money. Back in Vegas, Harold's body is discovered a few hours later.
It was actually a resident that found that box and saw Harold's body inside of it. The tenant then called 911.
When the police arrived at the scene, the first thing that they noticed was the rental truck still running right outside of the apartment complex.
Officers also noticed that the rental truck and the dolly that was on scene were from the same company.
Investigators rush to the truck rental facility to see if they can give them any information on who signed for the truck.
Once detectives arrived, they requested to see surveillance video. And as they watched the video, they saw Anthony renting the truck as well as purchasing the large box.
Armed with this new information, police obtain a search warrant for Melanie and Anthony's apartment. And once they open the door, a strong scent greets them.
They immediately smelled the cleaning products that Melanie had used to clean the apartment.
They entered the bathroom, which had appeared to be scrubbed clean. They saw what appeared to be blood evidence and blood throughout the bathroom, which was not apparent to the naked eye. They also found a black plastic bag in the apartment, which contained bloody clothing, which had trace blood evidence on it as well.
But that is not the only evidence that ties the two 20-year-olds to Harold's murder.
They found his glasses and the tip of his right thumb.
It appeared that Melanie and Anthony had left in such a hurry and were so panicked that they did not realize they left so much evidence behind.
After completing the search of the apartment, detectives begin the task of tracking down the two suspects. 5 days later, as police continue their investigation, Melanie and Anthony finally make it to Anthony's mom's house in the Golden State, after making stops to spend more of Harold's money.
After they left the daughter at the mother's house, they decided to have a little fun. They went to the nearest amusement park and had a whole bunch of fun on Harold's dime.
At the same time, investigators learn about the car they bought, and it becomes their ultimate undoing.
They were able to immediately locate the two pretty fast.
Police were able to pinpoint the couple's location in Venice Beach, California, where they were arrested by local police and the FBI.
Upon their arrest, police find the final nail in their freedom coffin. Checks from Harold Schilberg's bank account inside Melanie's purse.
They also found $1,900 in cash in her purse, and they found $400 on Anthony, which was most likely his paycheck.
LAPD had them in custody, and then they were eventually extradited back to Las Vegas.
Both are charged with murder with a deadly weapon, robbery with a deadly weapon, and burglary. Melanie's loyalty to her husband runs deep, and she confesses how she helped Anthony with the crime, but the duo enter a not guilty plea, with Anthony stating the attack on Harold as self-defense. Most likely to spend the rest of their lives in prison, Anthony decides to cut a deal with prosecutors to avoid having their daughter go without both her parents.
Anthony decided to be the man of the situation and take the brunt of the responsibilities for the murder.
As a result of Anthony's plea, Melanie Costantini pleads guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree murder and robbery and is sentenced to 25 years in prison. As for Anthony Steiger, he pleads guilty to first-degree murder with a deadly weapon and receives life in prison. In the end, Melanie's desire to keep her family together backfires when she lets greed take hold.
Sometimes women are manipulated or fall prey to a situation of where they'll do anything they feel that they have to in order to hold on to that man, even if it's something crazy, because many times there may be that pot of gold or a reward waiting for them at the end of this relationship.
Tốt rồi.